So hello there, this is Dimitris Christou and I'm back with another Blender video tutorial, and I'll keep talking about the dailies on this one. So we'll move on, and for this video I thought it would be also nice to take a look at the Blender files used to put together those images. So let's begin. We're having image number 15, the delta image. And let's open the file, and that's a file. Okay, and what we're having here is simple modeling. I've started this object from a simple circle object that uses 3 vertices, and I'm having issues with my right mouse button at the moment, so I'm trying to select it. Okay. I'm hitting the tab key to switch from object to edit mode. And as you can see, I've done some extrusions here. And what I've also done, hitting tab again and selecting this one, is that I've duplicated the triangle object. Moving over to the modifiers, and I've added a remesh modifier on it. Then a displace to create the displacement on the object surface, and then a wireframe modifier. Alright. Now this also uses some smart material placement, and I'm using cycles for this one. And you can see that I'm having 3 emission materials here, delta light 1, 2 and 3. That help me illuminate the object and the scene. This one also uses some emission, so the background is dark and all the light comes from emitting geometry. Alright. Simple modeling, some extrusions here and there. And I've also created some copies to add some depth to the scene. Okay, so moving on, back to the blog. We're having the lemon XYZ file. Let's find it. Okay. Now I've put together a video tutorial about building such scene. This is also used in the labyrinth image. And what I've done here is putting a simple SVG file together in Inkscape. You can see I've put these lines here and the little squares over here, and then brought the SVG file in Blender, and the SVG file is imported as curves, and then the curves are extruded. You can see the curve options here. Okay, set to 3D, and then some extrusion is used. Okay, and what I've also done here is added those simple array cubes. Yeah, there's array and a slight amount of bevel here. You can see it only if you come close enough. And I've used them just to break the uniformity of the SVG imported curves here. Another nice touch on this one is the floor, and the floor uses a mix shader that uses diffuse and a tiny bit of emission, and that emission here is what brings the scene to life and adds this nice yellow bright color to it. Alright, on to the next one, and the next one is this one. Now sadly I don't have the blend file for this one, but this is pretty simple. I've put together some ecospheres, you can see them right here, and done some extrusions on them. I've also used a bevel modifier and then created a copy, and the copy uses a wireframe modifier. There are 2 variations, 2 particles for the particle system that makes the entire scene. And I have the yellowish here and the pinkish here. And what I'm also using is that triangle object here that also uses some extrusion and some bevel. And it also uses Cycles emission material to illuminate the entire scene. Okay. Moving on, we've seen this one on the previous video tutorial, and this is a fluid simulation, as I said before. And on to number 20, we have the multi-dimensional salt. Let's find it. Pretty nice, pretty interesting file as well. And it's this one. Okay. Now what we're having here is actually a simple cube. Let's take a good look. Expand this one. Alright. And I'm hitting the tab key so you can see, and I'll also hit Z, that we're having a simple cube. And that simple cube uses a subdivision surface modifier set to 1 to add just a tiny bit of detail for the following modifiers to work on. And I'm using 2 displace modifiers to create this surface here on the object. And then another subdivision surface to smoothen the object. Some twisting. And actually, the twist modifier here is off, so you can enable it and see how it affects the objects. Alright. And also a bevel modifier. You can see, if I come close enough, you can see right here that it creates a nice little bevel for me. And it's nice to add, when you have those big objects here, some bevel. It makes them look less artificial and less edgy than normal. Now the other objects use pretty much the same modifiers, and I'm trying actually to select this one. Okay, hitting Z to grab, so move it to the side. Let's see it a bit. Now this one uses pretty much the same modifiers, only that the first Subserve modifier is set to 2 so that it generates more geometry for me to work with. And then we have the 2 displace modifiers, the second subdivision surface modifier, the twist simple deform modifier, and again this one is set to 0. You can also modify it. And you can see it creates an interesting result on the mesh. And for this one I'm using a remesh modifier, and this is set to 6. So that we're getting this nice blocks on the object. And I'm also having 1 and 2 wireframe objects. And again using pretty much the same modifiers, with the only difference that they both use a wireframe modifier. And the difference between those two is that the white wireframe object uses remesh set to 4, and the pink wireframe modifier uses remesh octave depth of 3. So this one is a bit more detailed when compared to this one. Now this one also uses an emission material that helps illuminate the entire scene and the objects. Very simple file, it takes some work to put together, but the interesting is quite nice. Moving over to the next one. Let's find it, and it's this one. It's the swirly blue file. Okay, let's open it. It's this one. Okay. Now I've put together a video tutorial about building such objects. It is called futuristic something. I don't really remember the name of the video tutorial. But feel free to check it out and see how I'm putting them together. Let's quickly see it. So what I'm having here is a simple cube, and I'm hitting the tab key to switch from object to edit mode, and see this is actually a cube. And again, Subserve Modifier set to simple. I don't want to have a smooth object, I just want to have an object with more detail on it. And then I'm using a taper simple deform modifier. If I hit the tab key, you can clearly see the way it affects the object. And then some stretch and displace and then remaze set to blocks to create that nice, interesting result. And what actually happens here is that every single object used in this scene uses some different modifier settings to create a different result. And in the middle of it all, we have this object right here. And this is actually glass array. Okay. You can see the array right here. I think it uses an empty to rotate, first on the y-axis, and then the entire thing uses some displays. You can see the displays here. You can see that the array here has some different surface as it moves on the y-axis. Some bedding, and then again another array, and the second array is what moves the entire thing on the y-axis and creates this object right here. Now this uses glass, simple class BSDF shader surface, and this is what creates this interesting file. And again some glossiness on this object, and they reflect the array here and all that. Pretty interesting file as well. Moving over to the next one, and let me find the next one. Okay, it's the nature maybe. I like this file a lot. Let's find it. Okay, it's this one. Okay. Let's take a look. I'm hitting the Z key to switch to solid. And what happens here, and this one actually uses Blender render, the Blender internal render. So we're having a cube. Alright, let's take a look at the modifiers. We have, I'm hitting the tab key to switch from object to edit mode, and this cube is subdivided a lot. And then uses Subserve Modifier, and then some displays to create the nice surface on the object. And then the cube uses a particle system with quite a few particles. Particles are put on the faces of the object, and you can see the particle settings here. Some nice random size. I've set them to be really small and to be quite a few, so that it creates a nice interesting result. And this also uses some compositing. And I've used the good old defocus node to add the depth of field effect seen in the final render. Alright, let's move over to the next one. And the next one is the space balls. Let's find it. Okay, no, not this one. And since you've seen that, I've put together those images in Apophysis, and I'm rendering them at quite a high resolution. Yep, not enough memory on my computer. Thank you, computer. And these are used with the Blender renders. So I'm creating some nice masks and colors with the apophysis renders and combine them with the Blender renders. Alright. Let's find the file. Okay. And it's this one. Alright. Now this uses some simple modeling. And I'm going to select this one and hit H to hide it. And hide this one as well. Alright. And what I'm having here is a hitting the tab key. This one started off as a cylinder. Then I've done a few extrusions on it. Added some nice bit of detail here and there. This is text, and I've set the text to simple geometry by hitting object and convert to mesh from curve meta surf text. And everything is put together in a single object. Everything is joined. And then, obviously, what we're having here is an array that moves the clones on the y-axis. I then have a particle system using this particle right here. Okay. Z key again to switch to solid and Alt H. I'm hitting 0 on my numeric keypad for the camera perspective view. And you can see the particle system in place. You can see these parts I've put together. And this actually uses the Blender internal. Now the Blender internal uses Indirect Lighting, and I've also used it, and I've said it on my previous video tutorial, on my previous video actually, they're not video tutorials. And I've also used the Indirect Lighting on this one. Alright, this one also uses Blender internal. Now, the Indirect Lighting has some high amount of bounces, and they're creating a pretty decent result of geometry that emits light in the scene. So I'm having a few materials here that use emission, you can see it right here, and they help me illuminate the scene and create this nice interesting result. Alright, so these are a few of the daily files. Let's see, we've reached the 24. Let's make another one. It's the Sneaky Hate. Okay, move over to Blender. Let's find the file. If I have it here, okay. Come on, open it. Alright. Now what we're having here is text. I'm selecting one of them. You can see it right here. Extruded text that uses modifiers, and it uses a Subserve Modifier, and it is set to 5 to add more geometry and more detail to it. And actually, and sadly, I don't know why, but in Blender there is no option to, when adding extrusion, there is no option to set some cuts on the extruded faces so you can work with the extruded text or curve. Now what I've done here is not all that good, but it's pretty decent. I'm adding a simple, this one is set to simple, not to Catmull Clark. This is set to simple, so this one just adds more geometry for the extruded object. so that the simple deform modifier can then create this nice interesting result. And again, using an edge split at the end to create this the object surface to be nice and all. Now 3 text files: the love, the hate, and the more, and I'm having the hate sneaking up on the love more text, so it's love hate more. Pretty interesting file, and you can see we have a simple mixader material, white for the love more and a nice bright red on the hate text. And at the background, what I'm having here is a simple array. I'm trying to select it. My mouse won't cooperate. Okay. And this uses diffuse and a tiny bit of emission. I'm hitting the tab key. And you can see this is a simple plus here that uses array on the X and Y axis. A nice pretty flat thing that adds a bit to the overall scene. So this is it. This is file number 25. Okay. And we'll move on with more. So this is Dimitris Christou. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. I've shared some tricks on how to put together the dailies. So thanks for watching.